Hello everyone, it's Mofi here. It's a pleasure to talk to you today. Welcome to the penultimate round of the Superbet Chess Classic in Romania. Alireza with 4 points was one of the leaders of the tournament, and on the round 8 he takes on Nodirbek Abdusattorov from Uzbekistan, one of the top chess players in the world, and super young, and Alireza has the white pieces. It's a very dynamic game. They are both of them very dynamic chess players and sharp players, very ambitious, and Alireza starts with pawn to e4, and yes, we get Sicilian, which is in the spirit of their styles as well. And after knight of 3, guess what? We have one of the sharpest opening in the chess world, which is not any kind of dragon, accelerated dragon, not even going for knight c6 first and then g6, not wasting any time, immediately going for fianchettoing that bishop from g7 and hitting the center with the bishop. So it's the ultimate dynamic and double-edged start and opening with black. And there's a pushes the pawn to d4, exchange one pair of pawns to get a knight into the center, and after knight c6 we have this c4, which is called Marokzi bind. Kind of white puts his pawns like this, potentially like maybe even b3, creates a hat or something like this, and controlling this d5 square, because in Sicilian, as they say, if you get to that d5, you just equalize. So white just creates a bind here and controls completely this d5 square. But the thing is, after bishop g7, this bishop is completely open, and you can also put pressure on this knight, and this bishop becomes very valuable because all the pawns are on the opposite colors, and this bishop becomes a bit passive. So it's going to be very dynamic. Blacks try to play on the queen side, and white plays on the king side most of the time, and mostly, or also in the center, as we will see. Bishop g7, Alireza plays bishop to e3, guarding this knight, and in this position you could continue like a standard classic dragon, like going d6, knight f6, castle, bishop d7, normally developing your pieces. But here a modern move here is, which is very now on fashion, is queen to b6, just hitting this knight left and right. And some players here, they already drew with knight b5, and then they come like knight, sorry, not knight b5, knight b3, for example. Alireza played this, and after queen d8, some players, they just drew, for example, like this, repetition. But oops, sorry about that, I just clicked on that button, sorry. And after queen b6, Alireza played knight b3, queen d8, and he come back, and after queen b6 here he played knight to b5 instead of knight to b3, and hitting the queen with the knight on b5. These are all theory. After queen a5 check, the best move according to computer is to come back. We are not going to deep dive why it is. It's just the best preparation, best move. And here there are two moves, knight f6 and queen b4. Abdusattorov played both of them before, but now he comes with new idea. He starts with d6, okay, which is not super weird or anything. Just opening this bishop, and wants to be flexible with this knight. Alireza just develops his bishop immediately, and here he shows a novelty in dragon which has never been played before. Knight to h6. I mean, I just gave him 2 exclamation marks because it's just very interesting. Goes for e5, just destabilizing and also distracting this pawn from the center. And who said knights on the reams are bad? I mean, normally it is bad, but in this scenario, you just want to go f5, knight g4. And in this position, according to the computers, high depths is h3 to limit this knight and go for queen c1 ideas. But Alireza here plays a very natural move, which is just knight d2. He just develops his knight, which is also a good move because you just want to kick out this queen from this diagonal. Of course, you don't want to win this pawn because that bishop is very powerful. You will have a lot of weaknesses, and also here you lose your knight. Even though even if you don't take, you just say, okay, I ruined your pawn structure. That's a positional mistake. All of your dark squares gonna get super weak, and I have 2 bishop advantage. Never do that. So here, after knight d2, Abdusattorov continues his plan, which he prepared with f5, and then after exchange of this, he will have 2 central pawns, and white will have no central pawns. So, but okay, this knight is super weird. And in this position, Alireza plays knight b3, queen d8, and he goes queen d2, immediately attacks this knight. You have to go knight g4, exchange of the minor pieces, and bishop h6, because you just lost your 2 bishop advantage, so you have to go harassing, trying to exchange 1 pair of bishops immediately, so black doesn't enjoy his 2 bishop advantage, and also make weaknesses on dark squares. You have to go castle here, otherwise your king gonna be stuck in the center. And after exchange by Alireza here, it's the kind of crucial moment. Alireza thinks a lot here about, I think, 20 minutes or something, if I'm not mistaken. He plays knight to d5, which looks supernatural. You want to you just centralize your pieces, and you just go for queen c3, maybe rook d1, maybe c5. It looks supernatural, but according to computer, rook d1 with the idea c5 would have been huge, not huge, like the only way to have some chances to advantage. Knight d5, and here Abdusattor plays the most natural move, which is knight to e5, attacking the pawn on c4. Let's take a look at this pawn structure. Black's pawn structure got a bit damaged, but the thing is, whenever you go short castle, then you cannot really play h3, g3. Your back rank will have some problems, essentially. So this pawn on g4 could be an annoying pawn, but if in the endgame we exchange a lot of pieces, then this white pawn structure could be better for white, because we have only 2 pawn islands and black has like 3 pawn islands if I want to show it with different colors. So pawn structure favors white. We want to exchange pieces. Also, if you just kick out this knight with e6, the pawn on d6 gonna be weak. I just come back to e3 and then hit this pawn with the rook. So that's why he goes here, attacks the pawn, and here there's a place queen c3, which is completely natural move, pinning this knight, maybe going for f4 or h3, going for opening the h file. But okay, it was kind of unnecessary according to computer. Knight d4, because you cannot take. I go queen c3, and if you come back here, I just go knight c7, oops, and then family fork or rook is hanging, you choose. So you cannot really take this pawn, but queen c3. And okay, according to here, Abdusattor thinks about 10 minutes or something, and he just plays b6, supernatural, because here knight c5, sometimes c5 also, the rook comes to d1. The computer were just saying just bishop d7, they don't care about some knight c5 or something, or c5 even. But b6, controlling this square, Alireza jumps into the center. Now maybe he's winking at these squares, and Abdusattorov here also, he could play king g8, but he decides to play e6. Apparently he saw this idea that after knight c6, the knight is pinned, you cannot take. You can just go queen h4, hitting this pawn, and after g3, you can just go queen g5. And actually your rook is not trapped here. Your rook is trapped, but you have counterattack like rook f3, and the knight is coming. It's very bad. Also, you could go, as Alireza was showing in the interview, even queen g5 after knight c7, trapping the rook. You can just go queen f6, counterattacking on this pawn, and if you take, you just lose everything. After that, the king is just super weak. So he just saw it, and he saw that, okay, let's just, instead of wasting time, let's just kick out the knight and bring the queen out. And here Alireza played knight e3, queen f6, attacks the pawn on f2, but instead of defending this pawn, Alireza keeps playing like aggressive and active, going long castle, because of course you cannot take. If you take this, I just can counterattack on d6 pawn, or first rook f1, kicking out your queen, and then going for after this, and this pin is annoying. You would be lost here. So here Abdusattorov played bishop a6, putting pressure on this c4 pawn. Sometimes you want to take, knight c4 takes, rook c8, d5, b5. He just wants to create counterattacks on Alireza's king. And here, in this position, Alireza played a defensive move, which is a4. As I explained, because sometimes you wanted to take, and then take rook c8, and then go for b5 or something. Here they had the same amount of time, but the best move here was kind of to try to open with h3. because for example, if you take with the knight here, I have knight e6 check, I win the rook. You cannot take with the queen is pinned. And if you take with the bishop, I can take, and rook c8, I just go b3. It looks dangerous, but it's nothing special. Every square is just controlled. And if you go, for example, d5 here, I can still take on e6, take on rook d5, play on this knight which is pinned. So the thing is, there was nothing. Actually, you could just go for opening this this file, but a4, not too bad, like defensive move. And after a4, immediately he goes king g8, because he wants to have this option after h3. For example, in some lines there is this is check knight e6. So immediately he goes king g8, so that after h3 he will have at least the option to take. So this is not at least a check on e6. Very sensible move. So you are not also in this diagonal as well. Your queen also not pinned. And here Alireza thinks a lot here. We are on move 23. He 17 moves to go, and he thinks a lot, and he plays b3, which looks like a natural move. But the thing is, you're just pushing a lot of pawns in front of your king. It's not that easy to play such moves, but it looks very solid. Now he has 18 minutes for 16 moves. Abdusattorov 31 minutes, and in this position he plays bishop to b7. Okay, he says, okay, you just consolidated here, I just go find another diagonal for my bishop, attacking the pawn on f3. And suddenly it's not easy to defend this pawn. Actually, it's not easy. So when it's not easy, what should you do? Counter-attacking on d6 or trying to attack on g4 pawn. In this position, Alireza goes for knight b5, attacking this. Still h3 was also an option. Probably it was a bit better, because if you take, I can take, and I have at least the h file, and if you take, I can go f3. But hey, knight b5 also is fine. But the thing is, after bishop e4, knight takes e6, d6. Here black has a very nice move here, which Abdusattorov plays the second best move. He played bishop to d3. Maybe you think it's a blunder, but the thing is, there is a tactic here. After if you take oh my god, what am I doing? Sorry. This is tricky. Sorry about that. So after bishop d3, if you take, knight can take, queen d3, and queen a1 check, queen b1, and queen a3 double attack. Your knight is hanging. I should be careful to not click on that button. And after bishop d3, so you cannot take. But there was a better move, knight d3. And now if you take, you cannot take the bishop with the same idea. If you take here, Alireza was showing that after knight g4, rook f4, he wanted to go knight e5, which f3 was better. Which the problem is, after f3, rook d8, knight b5, black has two options here. Either go a6 b5 or just take on c4 and mop up all the pawns. But Alireza was saying, okay, even knight e5, rook d8, knight d3, rook f8, even this one like is holdable practically. Computer says -1, but he thought it's holdable. It made sense as well. Knight d6, bishop d3, and now he's attacking this pawn. He's going to kick out this knight from d6 because the rook is not connected anymore. So we just go for doubling up and also guarding the pawn on f2. Rook d8, knight b5, a6. You don't go knight d4, because after knight d4 I go bishop e4, and then also knight c6. Actually knight c6, just because there's a pin here, and then it leads to a lot of exchanges. If you take rook d4, and then white would have no more chance. Of course, Alireza is playing to win. Knight a3, the knight is on the rim, and here bishop e4, just trying to exchange more rooks and go for knight d3 check, brings the rooks towards the center. And here Abdusattorov avoids exchanging rooks, giving up the d file, because you cannot go rook d8. The knight is hanging at the end. So he keeps the rook on the board. He wants to keep pressuring the king, and you go for b5. And okay, here they both have 5 minutes. We are on move 30, 10 moves to go. So the Alireza brings his king to safety, guards his queen. Rook c7 here, controlling the 7th rank. And here Alireza goes king a2, because we don't want to always worry about this knight d3 check and stuff like that. And he goes back to bishop c6. Sometimes he wants to go b5 maybe. Also Also, yeah, this bishop was exposed. Sometimes rook d4 could put pressure on this pawn as well. So you just come back with the bishop, which was not defended. Alireza goes queen d4 here. Maybe better chance was to just go rook d6. Rook d6 was probably a better move. Try to put pressure on his pawns. But okay, with low time on the clock, you're kind of worried about this pawn, which is now it's bad to take. After knight c2, white is winning. Yeah, I don't know what was he worried about after rook d6, but okay, as he said, he thought, okay, he can just go for attacking 2 pawns, and after rook b7, which Abdusattorov played, you cannot take, because after take there's b5, and suddenly all the files gonna be open over your king, and your king is very weak. So that's why you cannot take. And in this position, he just improves his knight to c2. He has only 1 minute for 6 moves. And after h5, guards the pawn. Knight to b4, going for this bishop, trying to simplify the position a little bit. And knight c6, knight c6. He doesn't exchange queens. He's playing for win, but he allows knight b4 check. Now, the collaboration of queen and knights in attack are very dangerous. Abdusattorov plays a very nice move here, rook f7. He wanted to trick Alireza because he didn't have time, 30 seconds. He wanted to provoke Alireza so that he goes for rook d6, but now queen g7, suddenly rook f2, rook here is mate. You don't have time to pin the queen, like rook f2 is going for the mate. So that's why Alireza didn't go rook d6, and he just went after exchanging these knights. And it's move 39. Abdusattorov doesn't exchange, because if you exchange, then it's only white who is playing for win. So you just keep your knight on c5 around the king. Very nice outpost as well. And Alireza brings... Oh, he didn't play knight e1. He played after knight a6. He played queen e3 first. Yeah, because knight c5 anyways was... There's not big huge difference. And now he played knight e1. Okay, after queen e3, he just got his extra time, 30 minutes. And after knight c5, knight e1, they both have 30 minutes on the clock. And the position, okay, is about equal. But the thing is, black's king is a bit weak. The pawn structure is a bit better for white. If I manage to exchange these 2 knights, then I have 3 against 2. I can create pass pawn easier. Also, the pawn structure, yeah, I mean... Objectively, black is completely fine here, but if as we will see, here queen e7 tries to give a discovery check, king a2. Now it's not very easy because knight d3 is coming. He had to also f3. I want to play f3 or f4, try to break this pawn structure, get to my knight to f3. He had to do something about that. For example, e5, f3. I don't have it because there's e4. And black is much better, or he could go rook f4 with the idea f3, take rook e4. He stopped this idea with queen h4, but the thing is he blundered this f4 move, which was very nice by Alireza, because now if you take, there is g3. I fork the pieces, but actually here there is still queen h3, which is still kind of fine for black, pins the pawn. But the thing is, your queen is just always weird here. You could also, for example, after f4 take on h2. But anyways, computer says 0 zeros. But I mean, the queen is always weird here. You never know. This queen is just getting... the queen is just bad here. So that's why he just took on f3 en passant. Knight takes f3 and queen f4. Queen e1 was a better move to keep the queens on the board and put pressure on this pawn. But he just plays rook e1 and he wants to just... have an easier game. I mean, it looks logical, just attacking the weaknesses. And yeah, white is better here definitely after the exchange of queens. And here Abdusattorov goes for rook f5, trying to activate his king as well, and also going for g5, g4. Here he kind of bluffed, because after rook d6, which looks like a natural move, he wanted to go g5. But after rook b6, g4, Alireza could just go knight e5, not knight d4, because then you could get checkmated. As we will see here, rook f1. Here, as he said, he missed king b2, because now after check, you just can't escape. That's why you put the knight on e5. So he just stopped this idea, and Abdusattorov bluffed again. Now it was the time to bring the king here and here to guard this d6 square, but he bluffs again. And he says, okay, if you go rook d6, now I want g5. I want g5, because if you take with the pawn, suddenly h4, h3, I undermine this pawn and this knight. What do you want to do about that? And if you take with the knight, I go rook f2 check, and it gets super crazy and dangerous. So Alireza just plays king to a3. There would be no more checks there, but actually it happens to be this is the best move. Rook d6 was also possible, but king a3 was also is objectively best move. And here rook b8 by Abdusattorov, going for defending this pawn sooner. And in this position, which is a critical position of the game, white has only moved to keep his advantage going and not allowing counterattacks to black. He has 14 minutes against 10 minutes, and in this position Alireza played rook d6, and after that Abdusattorov defended perfectly, as we will see. Here it was g3, kicking out the rook, because now this doesn't make sense. You have to come back, knight g5, rook e8. High depth is just half a pawn advantage, and yeah, but the thing is, he was worried about like rook d6, rook d8. Yeah, he just saw this and he didn't like the fact that the rook comes back. Now it's draw. But the thing is, you just can wait. Like for example, like this move, and you just put pressure. You just put pressure. Rook f2, maybe rook d6. Now it's fine because you can support your rook with the rook d2, because the rook on e3 could not go there. So it was a bit difficult. Rook d6 looks very natural, but the thing is, after rook g4, the rook is just super active here and forces your rook back to e2, which is passive. And after king g7 activates his king, it's not over actually. White is putting huge pressure. Rook c6 going for some checkmate ideas, and after rook b7, here Alireza goes for b4. Okay, a lot of some endgames could happen here, which was very interesting. For example, knight g5 here. I think intuitively, Alireza just thought this is dangerous. Like knight takes e6, takes, rook g4. These are all forced kind of. Takes, and rook g2. This is a very interesting endgame. For example, rook b5, this is one of the lines which could happen after, for example, rook a7 check, king h6. This pawn is becoming a queen. How you want to stop that? You 3 against 2, this pawn is becoming queen. You go here, h2, and now you just can wait. For example, a5, but still, black can just go here, and this is going to be a repetition, and it's going to be draw. This is one of the lines. This endgame could be interesting, but I think this pawn on h5 was scary. That's why he didn't go for it. And after rook b7, he just played pawn to b4. And Abdusattorov took on b4, very natural. Knight d3 was also possible. Takes, knight a6 check, because you want to go a5. You give check, kick out the king, and after king c3, knight c5, guarding this pawn. And after a5 here, look at this position. Looks like white is just winning here. But yeah, there is a very fantastic move here. Like you can find, probably it was difficult, but the thing is, what black can just find it with the process of elimination. This rook cannot move, this knight cannot move, this pawn falls. What to do? This rook cannot really move. But okay, you should give credit, he found that, because he also got king f8. But the thing with king f8 is that this knight e5, knight d7, there are some tactics. He just found king to h6, only move to keep the balance of the position. And now the position is completely equal. Alireza tries his best with knight e5, because if you take the pawn on b6, first of all, if you take with the rook, you just lose the rook with knight a4. And if you take with the pawn, and now knight a4 check, the thing is, you just didn't play rook f4, and your king is safe. And the thing is, your knight is just super active. Like, you just, for example, if you put the king on d3, even rook b6 takes, c5 here, there's knight f4, rook g2, a lot of things. This pawn is going nowhere. There's threats here. So yeah, this king h6 was very impressive. And yeah, for example, if you go king b4 here, I give check again, king c3, I come back. White doesn't have any move better than knight e5, attacking this, and only move again rook g3 check, because if you take this pawn, now actually king b4, now it wins, because I controlled this d3 square and my king is just marching. Now I'm threatening everything and it's just winning. So rook g3 check, kicking out the king. If you go here, oops, you get checkmated. So Alireza played king to c2, and here again, the only move to just kill the game. For example, knight b3 was also possible, attacking this pawn, but after rook b6, knight a5, for example, because knight, if you give check, it's just not good. I just can't go king d1, and my pawn is too fast. And the thing is also, here also, if you give check on e4, I just can take, and I win this endgame, for example. So sorry if it was just confusing. After king c2, yeah, here he found the best move. Knight b3, I was talking about this. Rook b6, knight a5, c5, rook c7. White could get some game, but he didn't even give that game to white. He just played rook a7. He just played rook a7 because just trading the pawns. Easy draw after that. And if you take with the pawn, which happened in the game, you cannot go for checkmate ideas like rook c8 stuff. The king is just super safe. There is no checkmate actually. So takes, check, and suddenly you have to go to d1. You don't have any other option. You're guarding the rook, and here you cannot go king d2. After king d2, knight b3, knight d4, GG, you lose. So you have to go king c2, rook a2, king d1, rook a1, and after a couple of moves, yeah, they repeated 63 moves. They agreed to draw, or 26 minutes of video. I talked a lot for this game, but okay, I hope you guys enjoyed and learned something. And if you learned something, one or two, make sure to like this video and subscribe my channel. Let's reach 2,000 subscribers. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys in the next recaps. Also, Alireza is down half a point from the leader, who is Prague. Tomorrow is going to be final round, and he is going to play with the black pieces against Deak. If he wins, he has chances to potentially win the tournament. So see you guys in the next recaps, and ciao ciao.